Those who stand for nothing fall for everything. This was said by Alexander Hamilton, a powerful Federalist, father of the Constitution, and creator of America's financial system. He was a man who stood for freedom, intelligence, and even power. He spoke his mind in writings and always fought for what he believed in. Whether it was on the battlefield fighting for freedom during the Revolutionary War, or defending his financial plan against the Democratic Republicans in Congress. While his life was cut short by a duel, this founding father was extremely impactful in making an outline for a country that would become a superpower. Hamilton is important to early America through his contributions in the American Revolution, his support of the Constitution, and his success in forming a strong federal government. Hamilton was an amazing writer. In fact, writing is what got him to America. Originally from the British island of Nevis, Hamilton was born on January 11th in either 1755 or 1757. He was born to Rachel Fawcett and James Hamilton. The two were not married and had one other son named James. When Alexander was 11, his father left his family, and 2 years later his mother passed away from an illness, which left Alexander and his brother orphaned. The brothers then moved in with relatives and spent most of their lives on St. Croix. Alexander worked as a clerk to support himself, but what he enjoyed most was writing. When a hurricane hit his home, he wrote about what he was experiencing. In great description, writing, "It seemed as if a total dissolution of nature was taking place. The roaring of the sea and wind, fiery meteors flying about in the air, the prodigious glare of almost perpetual lightning, the crash of the falling houses, and the ear-piercing shrieks of the distressed, were sufficient to strike astonishment into angels." His writings inspired people on the island to put funds together to send him to the American colonies to receive a proper education. He arrived in the colonies in 1772 and began studying at King's College, now known as Columbia University. There he studied many things, one being law. Hamilton was fascinated by America's movement towards freedom. In 1774, he began writing to attack Samuel Seabury, an outspoken loyalist. In one of his writings to John Jay in 1775, Hamilton said, "For opposition to tyranny and oppression very naturally leads them to a contempt and disregard for all authority. The due medium is hardly to be found among the more intelligent. It is almost impossible among the unthinking populace. When the minds of these are loosened from their attachment to ancient establishments and courses, they seem to grow giddy, and are apt more or less to run into anarchy." This was about the colonists and their hunger for freedom growing as the war became closer. In 1775, Hamilton began training with the militia to prepare for the Revolution, and by 1776, he was the captain of an artillery. He fought in many battles during the war, like Trenton and Princeton, and through his efforts he gained the attention from many higher-ups, one being General George Washington. In 1775, General Washington hired Hamilton to be on his military staff, which made Hamilton a lieutenant colonel. Hamilton was one of Washington's closest confidants. He kept accounts of the war and helped advise the general on war efforts. With help from the Marquis de Lafayette, Hamilton helped acquire weapons from the French to keep the troops supplied. In 1780, Hamilton married Elizabeth Schuyler, the daughter of Philip Schuyler, a very wealthy New Yorker. A year later, Hamilton left Washington's staff due to frustration, and Hamilton wrote to his father-in-law to inform him of his relief from the general staff, saying, "In less than an hour after, Tillman came to me in the general's name, assuring me of his great confidence in my abilities, integrity, usefulness, and of his desire in a candid conversation to heal a difference which could not have happened but in a moment of passion." Hamilton felt that Washington still respected him and that they were just having a falling out. Alexander assumed he would return to the battlefield. A few months later, in October 1781, the Battle of Yorktown began, and Washington needed Hamilton to help orchestrate the attack. Hamilton was given his own field of command and led continuous attacks, causing General Cornwallis to surrender. This battle was the last major one of the war, which ended 2 years later. With the war over, the newly freed colonies needed to figure out how to run a country. In 1782, Hamilton, now a lawyer, became a delegate to New York, and in 1787, he was sent to the Constitutional Convention. There, Hamilton talked about the essentials for government, and as recorded by James Madison, he said, "The great and essential principles necessary for the support of government are 1. An active and constant interest in supporting it. This does not exist in states in favor of the federal gov. They constantly pursue international interests adverse to those of the whole. 2, the love of power. Men love power. The states have constantly shown a disposition rather to regain the powers they had parted with more, or to give the effect to what they had parted with. 3, an habitual attachment of the people. 4, force by which may be understood a coercion of laws or coercion of arms. Have not the former except in a few cases. 5, influence. He did not mean corruption, but dispensation of those regular honors and emoluments, which produce an attachment to the government." Hamilton, being a Federalist, supported a strong federal government, and with his points he made it known that the states would not allow America to follow these principles as a country, but instead as separate unions. Hamilton tirelessly campaigned for the new Constitution to be ratified. He, along with John Jay and James Madison, wrote the Federalist Papers to convince other delegates to allow the Constitution to pass. In the first Federalist paper, he wrote, "Nothing less than the welfare of the Union, the safety and welfare of the parts of which it is composed, the fate of an empire, in many respects, the most interesting in the world." In simpler terms, he said that a strong union under government is safer for the people. He also said in the 84th Federalist paper, "This may truly be denominated the cornerstone of republican government. For so long as they are excluded, there can never be serious danger that the government will be any other than that of the people." This excerpt is saying that the American government will be new and could create a basis for government to come. And if everyone is included in the formation of government, it will belong to the people. These papers were instrumental in the success of the Constitution and the establishment of a strong central government. With the Constitution in place, a strong cabinet needed to be formed. Washington was elected president, and he appointed Hamilton as Secretary of the Treasury. Hamilton was in charge of creating a financial system for the young country. He decided to create a plan in which the federal government would assume state debts from the war, and then be able to borrow money at lower interest rates to pay off the debts. The plan was great for large states, but smaller states that had already paid off debts did not want to pay any more. The plan was battled for 6 months, and a compromise was reached between Hamilton, Jefferson, and Madison. The compromise was that the capital would be moved down the river to current-day D.C. in order to get southern smaller state votes. This worked, and America paid off their debts while becoming a good investment to foreign countries. In 1791, Hamilton also created a national bank to help push for the one large government plan. Another plan of Hamilton's was to create tariffs to protect American businesses and turn America from slavery being its main form of income. This interrupted Thomas Jefferson's plan to have a nation of farmers. His plan was more modern for the time, especially with the idea of not relying on slavery. Alexander Hamilton resigned from the cabinet in early 1795, but he remained active in politics. In 1796, Hamilton drafted Washington's farewell address. This created a precedent for all presidents to write a farewell address. Hamilton was set back when he released to the public that he had an affair in the Reynolds pamphlet. He released this to prove his innocence and the charge that he was embezzling funds, and by doing so he revealed his affair. Hamilton exclaimed, The charge against me is a connection with one James Reynolds for purposes of improper pecuniary speculation. My real crime is an amorous connection with his wife for considerable time with his privity and connivance. If not originally brought on by a combination of husband and wife, with the design to extort money from me. He then goes on to say, this confession is not made without a blush. I cannot be an apologist for any vice because the adore may have made it mine. I can never cease to condemn myself for the pang which it may inflict in a bosom eminently entitled to all my gratitude, fidelity, and love. Hamilton shows through his writing that he believes he was taken advantage of by a couple and that he is embarrassed by what he did. The Reynolds pamphlet helped clear Hamilton's name in crime, but socially did not help him. Shortly after the scandal, his eldest son Philip was killed in a duel, and the Hamilton family was hurt again. After a short period of silence, Hamilton helped an old enemy, Thomas Jefferson, become president. By doing this, he was going against Aaron Burr, who had always been an acquaintance of sorts to Hamilton. Burr was very angry about losing the presidency, and blaming Hamilton challenged him to a duel. On July 11, 1804, Hamilton met Burr in Weehawken, New Jersey for the duel. There, Burr mortally wounded Hamilton, who would die the next day in New York. His wife Eliza lived for 50 more years and helped establish Alexander's legacy. Almost 220 years later, Alexander Hamilton is still remembered for the work he did to free America, establish the Constitution, and build a strong federal government. Today, the United States still has one strong central government as he would have wanted, as well as a national bank. Hamilton is also on the $10 bill and considered a key part of making American banks what they are today. One of the biggest ways Hamilton is remembered is the musical Hamilton, written by Lin-Manuel Miranda, that tells the story of Hamilton's life. In 2015, it rapidly gained popularity, winning award after award and spreading awareness on how Alexander Hamilton impacted America. The play allowed a younger generation to learn about a strong immigrant who helped create a new country where anyone could speak their mind. Alexander Hamilton is one of the most influential people in American history and helped a country flourish by using his own talents.
Let me tell you what I wish I'd known when I was young and dreamed of glory. You have no control. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?